These are the journalisms by way of critical aggregation, eliminated from the analytical research of a historiographer neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental. Your engagement through a like, a share, and subscribe will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Engage impulse engines. Engage.
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 Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Captain.
Engage emergency override.
Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage forward shields, 35%.
Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Palestine Resistance response to Nablus Massacre. Watch this space. Israeli forces killed 11 Palestinians in a Nablus raid. Dozens of Palestinians also wounded by live fire and taken to hospital after violent Israeli incursion in the occupied West Bank city. At least 11 Palestinians have been killed and dozens wounded in an Israeli army raid in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. At least 102 people were also injured on Wednesday, 82 hit by live ammunition, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. 6 were in critical condition. A 66-year-old man who suffered from gas inhalation during the raid died in hospital later on Wednesday, the ministry said. That's from AlJazeera.com and from Palestine Chronicle. What you need to know about the later Israeli massacre in Nablus, or the latest Israeli massacre in Nablus. What happened? On Wednesday morning, Israeli forces raided the occupied city of Nablus in the West Bank. The Israeli attack on one of the most populous Palestinian cities resulted in the killing of 10 Palestinians and wounding of 102 more. The Palestinian Ministry of Health, which released the names of the Palestinian victims, also said that hundreds of Nablus residents were treated for tear gas inhalation, as hundreds of canisters were thrown at Palestinian homes and neighborhoods throughout the raid. Why? The Israeli military issued a statement following the bloody attack saying that the target of their operation were 2 Palestinian resistance fighters. A total of 10 Palestinians were killed in the raid. Their names, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, are Adnan Sabara, 72, Abdul Hadi Abdulaziz Ashkar, 61, Mohammed Farid Shaban, 16, Tamar Nimr Minawi, 33, Mohammed Khalid Anbusi, 25, Musab Minar Awais, 26, Hussam Bassam Islim, 24, Mohammed Abdul Fatah Abdul Ghani, 23, Walid Riyad DeClassified, 23, and Jasser Jamil Kanyar, 23. Timing. 2 days prior to the Israeli raid, the United Nations Security Council, under intense U.S. pressure, failed to put a draft resolution condemning illegal Jewish settlements in occupied Palestine to a vote. The draft was a binding resolution that in part demanded that Israel should immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestine territory. Instead, a statement that was issued by the UNSC criticizing the ongoing constructions of illegal Jewish settlements. Even though Israel still protested the statement, some media reports suggested that a deal was reached between Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and the U.S. According to Axios news website citing officials, Israel agreed to decrease the number of Israel military raids in Palestinian cities and to several economic steps that will increase Palestinian tax revenues in exchange for the reinstatement of the so-called security coordination and a downgrade of the UN resolution. The Israeli attack on Nablus soon after the UN criticism and the Washington brokered deal suggests that Tel Aviv is unfazed by international criticism and refuses to abide by any understanding involving the PA, even if that understanding is achieved through mediation. Larger context. Moreover, the latest raid is a continuation of an Israeli pattern where Israeli occupation forces raid Palestinian cities and refugee camps, killing a large number of Palestinians without engaging in prolonged combat. This latest raid, for example, lasted for only 3 hours. These operations and other violent Israeli military tactics have resulted in the killing of 61 Palestinians since the beginning of the year. Last year also witnessed unprecedented violence. In October, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Winnesland, said that 2022 promised to be the deadliest year for Palestinians since the UN started tracking fatalities in 2005. While international reactions to the latest violence in Nablus remain muted, leading Palestinian resistance groups warned that the latest Israeli crime will not pass without retaliation. Though a war on Gaza remains a possibility, the nature of Palestinian retaliations has changed in recent months. Thus, the Palestinian response could take any form, from firing rockets towards Israel to the targeting of occupation soldiers or armed settlers. And from Press TV, Palestinian groups slam Israeli regime's carnage in Nablus, vow retaliation. Palestinian resistance factions and officials have strongly condemned Wednesday's carnage in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus, in which at least 10 people were killed and over 100 injured by Israeli regime forces. In a statement, the Gaza-based Hamas resistance movement announced what it called the brutal extrajudicial execution of Palestinians in Nablus. Hisham Qasim, a senior member of Hamas political bureau, said the right response to the massacre is activating a resistance force in all of the occupied Palestinian territories and launching retaliatory attacks against Israeli forces and settlers. A spokesman for the military wing of Hamas warned in a short statement that the Palestinian resistance is running out of patience. The resistance in Gaza is monitoring the escalating crimes conducted by the enemy against our people in the occupied West Bank and is running out of patience, said Abu Obaida, spokesman for the Hamas armed wing. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad also called the Israeli attack a heinous crime, saying Palestinians will not allow the atrocity to go unpunished. In a statement, the group said the blood of the Palestinian martyrs will not be wasted, and the enemy's goal behind this act of aggression will fail, as such attacks reinforce resistance against the apartheid regime. The resistance group said the Israeli enemy must await the response of the Palestinian resistance any moment and from anywhere. Organized terrorism. Nabil Abu Rudaina, a spokesman for Palestinian Authority, also condemned the deadly military raid and called for an end to the continued Israeli aggression against Palestinians. He said the occupying regime is responsible for this dangerous escalation that's pushing the region towards an explosion. The crime committed by the occupation forces in the city of Nablus today reaffirms the importance of our demand that the international community must act immediately to stop the Israeli crimes against our people, their land and their sanctities, and stop the unilateral Israeli measures, said Abu Redina. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh described the Israeli killing of Palestinians in Nablus as organized terrorism and urged the UN to stop practicing double standards. The Israeli aggression is organized terrorism through which Israel seeks to export its internal crisis to the Palestinian arena, he said. Shtayyeh called on the UN to stop the policy of double standards that encourages Israel to continue its aggression against the Palestinian people. Whatever is practiced against our people will not deter them from continuing their legitimate struggle to achieve their goals of freedom, ending the occupation, and establishing their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital, he added. Hussein al-Sheikh, a top member of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, also decried the incursion as a massacre, and he called for internal protection for our people. The Palestinian Health Ministry said at least 10 Palestinians were killed by Israeli soldiers, including a 72-year-old man and a 14-year-old boy. At least 102 Palestinians were also injured, with over 80 of them suffering gunshot wounds. The death toll increases. Hamas factions in Gaza can lose their patience. This is from Reuter. Maybe Reuter? Reuter. The death toll increases. Hamas factions in Gaza can lose their patience. Gaza military spokesman Hamas Abu Obaida warned that the factions in Gaza can lose their patience. The statement came after 10 Palestinians were killed and more than 100 others injured in armed clashes between Palestinians and Israeli troops in Nablus on Wednesday. Leaders in the local offshoot of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other local terrorist groups were among those killed. Netanyahu, peace with Saudi Arabia is Israel's goal. The resistance in Gaza is witnessing the enemy's increasing crimes against our people in the occupied West Bank, and the patience is running out. Spokesman for Hamas al-Qassam brigades Abu Obaida was quoted as saying by Middle East Monitor. On Wednesday afternoon, Palestinians started burning tires near the Israeli border at Camp Malaka, east of Gaza City, according to Palestinian reports. Hamas spokesman Hazem Qasem condemned the attack, stating the occupation increased its aggression against our people by storming today the city of Nablus and laying the siege to the people. The right-wing fascist Zionist governments are concerned about the escalation of the situation on the ground because they have a terrorist criminal agenda, Qasem added. 9 Palestinians killed in Israeli attack on Nablus City. Previously, Baruch, a soldier in the Gavadi Brigade, was shot by terrorists near the Shaveh Shomron settlement in Samaria on October 11. The other 2 members of the cell that killed Baruch were captured by the IDF last week. After surrounding the building where the terrorists were hiding, there was an armed clash that killed the 3 terrorists. Other armed Palestinians who opened fire on Israeli troops and threw explosives and Molotov cocktails at them were also shot during the clashes, according to the IDF spokesperson unit. The 3 fugitives were identified by the IDF as Mohammed Fatah, a member of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement, Walid Dakhil, a member of the Lion's Nest terrorist group, and Hussam Aslim, one of the leaders of the Lion's Nest group. Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement Hamas. Hamas condemns Israel's occupation, escalating aggression against Palestinians in Nablus. Hamas spokesperson Hazem Qasem and the Israeli occupation is escalating its aggression against the Palestinian people with its invasion of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus and besieging some of its citizens. The new extremist fascist occupation government has made plans to continue its aggressive agenda against the Palestinian people. And this is from the Cradle. PIJ Arab States condemns Israel's Nablus massacre. Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Ziad al-Nakhala promised retaliation for Israel's early morning raid, which killed 11 Palestinians, including civilians. What happened today on 22 February in Nablus is a major crime committed by the occupation against the Palestinian people, according to a statement by Ziad al-Nakhala, the Secretary General of Palestinian Islamic Jihad al-Mayadeen. It's our duty as resistance forces to respond to this crime without hesitation, Nakhala said, while stressing that the Palestinian people are united in the face of the enemy, and this will be proven, Allah willing. PIJ media representative Daoud Shihab told al-Mayadeen that the group's armed wing would respond to today's Israeli army raid on Nablus, in which occupation soldiers killed 11 Palestinians, including 6 resistance fighters and 4 civilians, and injured some 100 people. Shahab declared that the Al-Quds brigades that began in Jenin and Nablus are able to hurt the enemy again. We're sure that the response to the crime of Nablus will soon come. Anticipating Palestinian retaliation to the early morning operation, Israel police have raised their level of alert with a focus on additional security efforts in towns close to the West Bank separation barrier, Jerusalem, and additional central cities. Nakhala and Shahab's statements came as Palestinian Authority officials requested that UN Security Councils hold an emergency session in response to today's Israeli operation in the northern West Bank town, Wafa news agency reported. Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Minister Riyad Malki stated that the PA leadership has also requested that the Council of the League of Arab States and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation convene a meeting to condemn what he described as the Israeli massacre and to ensure international protection for the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar joined Jordan in condemning today's deadly Israeli military raid, the Times of Israel reported. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry describes the Israeli occupation forces storming of the Palestinian city a serious violation of international law and called on the international community to stop such escalations. Egypt's foreign ministry also slammed the occupation's assault on Nablus and expressed its deep concern that the operation will further escalate tensions. Qatar's foreign ministry issued a statement saying it strongly condemns the raid, calling it an extension of Israel's continuation and systematic crimes against the Palestinian people. Doha further warned of an explosion of tensions in the Palestinian territories as a result of the Israeli escalation, calls on the international community to act to stop such Israeli attacks and to provide protection to the Palestinian people. Notably, Abraham Accord signatories UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco did not join their fellow Arab states in condemning the raid. All three countries normalized relations with Israel after signing the accords, which were negotiated in 2020 under the auspices of the Trump administration. And from UPI.com, Israeli soldiers killed 10 Palestinians in Nablus raid. Thousands attend the funeral held for 10 Palestinians who were killed by Israeli army troops during a raid in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus on Wednesday, February 22, 2023. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed, dozens wounded, while 102 people were injured on Wednesday, with 82 hit by live ammunition, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. 6 were in critical condition. And from IMEMC.org, this is Israeli army kills 11 Palestinians, shoots 102, 6 seriously in Nablus. After a Palestinian man, 66, died from severe effects of tear gas inhalation, the Palestinian Health Ministry has confirmed that the Israeli soldiers have killed 11 Palestinians and injured more than 102 during the Wednesday Israeli offensive on Nablus in the northern part of the occupied West Bank. The Health Ministry said Anan Shaukat Enab, 66, was rushed to hospital in Nablus, suffering the severe effects of tear gas inhalation, and succumbed to his wounds despite all efforts to revive him. If confirmed that the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli soldiers during the Israeli offensive on Nablus Wednesday is 11, and added that the number of wounded Palestinians is 102, including 6 who suffered very serious wounds. One of the slain Palestinians, Abdul Hadi al-Ashkar, 61, was sent to the Najah National University, where his son Elias works as a nurse at the emergency unit. He was shocked to see his father there, and despite all his efforts, the father died in his arms. Soldiers also killed and injured many Palestinians while trying to seek shelter from their gunfire. And they're the slain Palestinians. We already read through those. 47 Palestinians, including 3 who suffered life-threatening wounds, were rushed to Rafidia Government Hospital. 20 Palestinians, including 1 who suffered life-threatening wounds to the back and abdomen, were rushed to Nablus Specialty Hospital. 15 Palestinians, including 3 who suffered life-threatening wounds, were rushed to the Najah Hospital. 9 Palestinians were shot with live fire. 11 Palestinians were shot with live fire. More than 250 Palestinians suffered the effects of tear gas inhalation. The Israeli army said 2 of its soldiers were injured during exchanges of fire with Palestinian fighters in Nablus. The Palestinian Health Ministry has confirmed that the Israeli soldiers killed 10. And this is update 3, so I think if we read update 4, it includes all of update 3. And from Tehran, this is Social News XYZ. Iran condemns Israeli killing of Palestinians in Nablus. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani has condemned the brutal Israeli attack on the northwest bank city of Nablus. Kanani made the remarks in a statement published Wednesday on the Foreign Ministry's website, reacting to the attack by the Israeli army on Nablus earlier in the day, in which 10 Palestinians were killed, including an old man and a 14-year-old boy, and at least 102 injured, Xinhua News Agency reported. And here's a clip from Press TV on the matter.
This will only increase the determination for resistance among the Palestinians. The Israeli government is really acting as expected as a fascist extreme right-wing government would be expected to act, and we only expect the worst from them. But it's time for the international community to stop being nice to this regime. This is an apartheid racist regime. And so it's really the international community's responsibility to act and support people under oppression. The international community supports Israel. There are governments like the United States and the United Arab Emirates that are supporting and funding the Israeli occupation to do the horrific things that they are doing to our people. It is rather sick. We consider them partners in crime, basically. Now, why do they do it? They do it very simply because there's a very strong Zionist lobby around the world that promises them various things, especially keeping their regimes in power.
Palestinian officials and resistance factions have strongly condemned the fatal raid on the West Bank city of Nablus. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh says the raid is part of systematic terrorism. He urged the UN to stop adopting double standards that encourages Israel to go on with its crimes against Palestinians. Shtayyeh stressed the Israeli practices won't undermine the Palestinians' legitimate struggle aimed at ending occupation. The top Hamas figure has also denounced the, quote, brutal extrajudicial execution of Palestinians in Nablus. Hisham Ghassam said the right response to the massacres is the activation of resistance in all occupied Palestinian territories and retaliatory attacks against Israeli forces and settlers. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the military wing of Hamas, Izzadin al-Qassam Brigades, has also warned that the resistance front is running out of patience. Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein
And from ansamed.info, 10 Palestinians killed in West Bank clashes with Israelis. Ten Palestinians were killed in clashes with the Israeli army during a military operation in Nablus in the West Bank. The number of victims were reported by the Palestinian Ministry of Health and cited by Wafa news agency. The number of wounded are at least 102 persons, 7 are in serious condition. Israel practices organized terrorism, says PA Premier. Organized terrorism, these are words used by Palestinian Authority Premier Mohammed Shtayyeh to define the continuous Israeli aggression against our people in the city of Nablus. A terrorism, the Premier explained, as reported by Wafa news agency, through which Israel tries to export its internal crisis to the Palestinian area. Shtayyeh then called on the UN to put an end to double-standard politics, which encourages Israel to continue its aggression against Palestinians. The spokesperson for Mahmoud Abbas, Nabil Abu Rudeina, accused the Israel government of being responsible for this dangerous escalation. Immediate attacks thwarted in Nablus, says Israeli army. The occupation conducted by the Israeli army today in Nablus, in which at least 10 Palestinians were killed according to local sources, was ordered to neutralize 3 wanted individuals who were involved in armed attacks in the West Bank. They were also planning new attacks in the near future. The Israeli army and the Shin Bet, the Internal Security Service, issued a joint press release communicating this news. 2 of the men were wanted by the police. Hussam Asalim and Walid Dakhil were militants in the local faction in Nablus known as the Lion's Den. The 3rd wanted man, Muhammad Allah Fatah, was a member of the Islamic Jihad. And AA.com, Palestinian premier urges EU to stop policy of promoting Israeli aggression. Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh receives delegation from European Parliament EU representative to Palestine in Ramallah. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh urged the European Union on Wednesday to end its double-standard policy that encourages Israel to continue its attack. Shtayyeh received the chair of the European Parliament delegation for relations with Palestine, Margaret Auken, at his office in Ramallah, according to a statement by the Prime Minister's office. The EU representative to Palestine, Sven Kuhn von Bergsdorf, was also present at the meeting. Shtayyeh briefed the delegation on Israel's increasing violations against the Palestinians and the recent attack in the West Bank city of Nablus. He urged the EU to take punitive measures to halt Israel violations against internal law in Palestine. The death toll from the raid carried out by the Israel army in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus rose to 11 late Wednesday. The Palestinian Health Ministry released a statement saying that 66-year-old Anan Shaukat Anab, who suffered from tear gas inhalation, died in the hospital. The ministry said 102 others were also injured, including 6 in critical condition. According to witnesses, Israeli army forces raided Nablus and surrounded a house in the old city, triggering an exchange of fire with gunmen. Explosions were also heard in the city. Israeli forces have repeatedly carried out raids in Nablus in search of members of the Lion's Den group, which emerged in the occupied West Bank last year. Tel Aviv accuses the group of carrying out deadly attacks on Israeli targets. And watch this space, and remember that your engagement through a like, a share, and or subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Iraq's regional role more prominent than ever, Iranian foreign minister says. Erbil Kurdistan region. Iran's foreign minister praised Iraq's regional role, claiming that it's more prominent than ever during his visit to Baghdad on Tuesday. The regional role of Iraq has become more prominent today than ever, Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian told the Iranian state media. Considering their privileged relationship we have with Iraq and the various issues that are on the agenda of the relations between the two countries, we feel satisfied and pleased that the friendly and brotherly country of Iraq is in its natural place in the region, he added. Abdollahian arrived in Iraq on Tuesday upon the invitation of Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein. The Iranian foreign minister is set to meet with Iraq's three presidencies and the Iraqi foreign minister to discuss bilateral relations at all levels and ways to adopt a dialogue as a way to enhance aspects of joint cooperation in a way that enhances the security and stability of the region and reflects positively on the two neighboring people. Iraqi foreign minister spokesman Ahmad al-Sahaf told Iraqi state media, Iran and Iraq have shared a strong relationship since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. Tehran has since increased its influence over Baghdad, and the country has dozens of armed groups who are affiliated to the Shiite rule in Tehran. Both countries also share a strong economic relationship. Iraq's main purchases from Iran are agricultural products, engineering services, construction materials, energy such as electricity and natural gas. Baghdad has received waivers from Washington allowing it to buy Iranian electricity and natural gas. Tehran in 2022 announced that they expect over $9 billion worth of goods to its neighbor by March 2023. In 2021, Iran said they had exported $11 billion worth of food and agricultural products to Iraq in 5 years. In 2019, Iraq accounted for around $9 billion of Iran's $12.5 billion in exports. And from IraqiNews.com, Iran's foreign minister visits Iraq to discuss stalled talks with Saudi Arabia. Iran's top diplomat Hossein Amir Abdollahian held talks with neighboring ally Iraq Wednesday to discuss stalled talks with arch rival Saudi Arabia to ease regional tensions as well as on border security. Iraq's taken a key role as a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia since 2021, after Riyadh broke off diplomatic relations in 2016, but efforts have been deadlocked for several months. Amir Abdollahian, speaking to reporters in Baghdad alongside his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein, hailed the efforts to strengthen talks and cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Since April 2021, Iraq has hosted a series of meetings between the two sides, but no talks have been publicly announced since April 2022. As part of the strengthening of cooperation, the countries of the region, we welcome a resumption of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, he said. Iran and Saudi Arabia have backed opposing sides in various conflicts in the region, including in Yemen. Amir Abdollahian also spoke to similar mediation efforts carried out between Iran and Egypt. He also mentioned slow progress in talks Vienna with world powers aimed at reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear accord, which promised Iran sanctions relief in exchange for cutting back its nuclear activities. The United States unilaterally withdrew from the deal in 2018 and reimposed sanctions, prompting Iran to begin walking back on its commitments under the accord. Negotiations to return to the deal started in 2021, but stalled late last year. Iran's ready to take steps to conclude the negotiations on the basis of previous discussions and respecting the red lines defined by Tehran, Amir Abdollahian said. But if the American side chooses another path, all options are on the table, he added without elaborating. His Iraqi counterpart pleaded for a resumption of talks. It's important for Iraq that the Iranian and American parties reach an agreement, Hussein said. The two ministers also discussed security on the border after Iran last year bombed Iranian Kurdish opposition groups sheltering in northern Iraq. Tehran accuses Iraq-based Kurdish groups of carrying out attacks in Iran and of encouraging the months-long protest that erupted after the September 16th death in custody of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini, following her arrest for an alleged breach of dress rules. Iraq later redeployed border guards to limit tensions. The Iraqi government has taken a series of measures to protect the frontier, and we agree that certain groups should not be allowed to cross the border, Hussein said. And from the cradle, KRG calls for energy cooperation with Baghdad. The KRG efforts to sideline Baghdad in exporting oil and gas via Turkey has stalled efforts to develop the region's gas capability. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Falah Mustafa, senior advisor to the president of the KRG, the Kurdistan Regional Government, stressed the need for Erbil and Baghdad to work together to make better use of their natural gas resources. On 20 February, Radal quoted Mustafa as saying that for us, energy security is important, but before that, it's important to us that the Kurdistan Regional Movement or the Kurdistan Regional Government or within Kurdistan region have a common stance and work on a strategy with Baghdad to be able to make use of that natural resource and develop the country. So far, the Kurdistan region's large natural gas reserves have been underdeveloped and are only used for domestic purposes due to the legal disagreements between Erbil and Baghdad dating back to 2013. In November 2013, the KRG and Turkey signed a deal that allowed for oil and gas pipelines to be developed to export hydrocarbons to Turkey and world markets. Turkey, whose economy was increasingly dependent on expensive Russian natural gas, sought to lay the infrastructure to import cheaper gas from its Kurdish neighbors. The agreement, which anticipated that KRG natural gas would begin flowing to Turkey by 2017, would allow Kurdish officials in Erbil to receive payment for oil and gas exported to Turkey from Ankara directly, rather than having to rely on the Iraqi government to dispense the region's share of oil, gas, and revenue. Erbil moved closer to achieving independence from the central authority in Baghdad due to the ISIS invasion of Mosul in 2014. The chaos created by the collapse of the Iraqi army in the face of the assault allowed the Kurdish security forces, Peshmerga, to take Kirkuk, a city with massive oil reserves and long disputed between Arabs and Kurds. Immediately after the capture of Kirkuk, the KRG began exporting oil independently to Turkey, much of which was then sold to Israel. Baghdad viewed the Turkish-Kurdish agreement signed in 2013 as illegal and has challenged it in the Iraqi courts. In 2022, then Iraqi Minister of Oil Hassan Abdul Jabbar equated the KRG's oil contracts with internal oil companies, IOCs, with smuggling oil. With the outbreak of war between Russia and Ukraine last year and the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, access to Kurdish natural gas is becoming more important not only for Turkey but also for Europe. Therefore, cooperation between Baghdad and Erbil in jointly developing the sector is increasingly important. And from Mehr News Agency, this one is entitled Iran FM Calls for Finalizing Security Co-op Document with Iraq. Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian, in a meeting with his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein, called for finalizing the Iran-Iraq security cooperation document in the shortest time possible. Referring to the comprehensive legal measures taken by Iran and Iraq regarding the case of the anti-terror commander's assassination, the top Iranian diplomat called for accelerating the finalization of the case and the prosecution of the perpetrators of the inhumane terror. Dubbing Tehran-Baghdad ties as strategic, Amir Abdollahian also called for finalizing the security cooperation document between the two countries, as well as holding the Iran-Iraq Joint Economic Commission in the near future. Elsewhere in his remarks, Amir Abdollahian considered the activities of some separatist and terrorist groups in northern Iraq unacceptable. He also held the efforts made by the Iraqi side to solve this issue as well. The Iranian foreign minister also pointed to the vast capacities of Iran-Iraq economic cooperation and expressed hope that the issues related to Iran's commercial demands would be resolved soon and completely. Amir Abdollahian also described the cooperation between the two countries on border issues as positive and constructive. Fuad Hussein, for his part, stressed that the Iraqi government would not let the country's territory be used to threaten its neighbors. Referring to his recent negotiations with the U.S. officials over using banking and commercial exemptions, the Iraqi foreign minister emphasized that his country is determined to facilitate commercial and banking relations with Iran. Several consular issues were also discussed between the foreign minister of Iran and Iraq during the meeting. And from Kurdistan24.net, Iranian foreign minister arrives in Baghdad. He'll also meet with his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein and National Security Advisor Qasem al-Araji, he added. Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs Hossein Amir Abdollahian arrived in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad on Tuesday overnight for an official visit, according to the Iraqi Foreign Ministry. Amir Abdollahian will meet with the country's top leaders, including President Abdul Latif Rashid, Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, and Parliament Speaker Mohammed al-Halbusi in Baghdad. Ahmad al-Sahaf, the spokesperson for the Iraqi Ministers of Foreign Affairs, announced. He'll also meet with his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein and National Security Advisor Qasem al-Araji, he added. The Iranian diplomat will discuss bilateral relations as well as enhanced cooperation between the two countries, according to the spokesperson. Adopting a balanced foreign policy, Iraq has so far hosted at least 5 rounds of talks between the regional arch-rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran in the Iraqi capital. Baghdad's trying to revive the stalled talks between Riyadh and Tehran, Prime Minister al-Sudani recently said at the Munich Security Conferences. In a January interview with France 24 in Paris, the premier said he gives particular attention to the de-escalation efforts that Baghdad's undertaken. Regarding the increasing tensions between Washington and Tehran on Iran's nuclear program, al-Sudani said these tensions could negatively impact Iraq. Iraq does not want its soil to be a place for settling scores, the premier said. From the MediaLine.org, Iraq's gas oil deals with UAE and China mean more energy independence from Iran. Despite being rich in oil and gas fields, Iraq has been importing most of its gas from Iran, placing it in a risky economic and security situation. Iraq has signed energy deals with Emirati and Chinese companies for the development of 6 different gas and oil fields spreading throughout the country in what appears to be a bid to become more self-sufficient and benefit from its own natural resources instead of importing most of its gas from neighboring Iran. The UAE-based Crescent Petroleum Company is one of the enterprises that signed a deal with Baghdad on Tuesday. It finalized 3 20-year agreements with Iraq's Ministry of Oil to develop and produce oil and gas fields, and from 2 gas fields in Diyala and Governorate and 1 field in Basra Governorate. The agreements will deliver much-needed natural gas to fuel nearby power plants and improve government services, creating thousands of new jobs in Diyala and Basra, Crescent Petroleum said in a statement on Tuesday. Iraq also signed 2 contracts with China's GeoJade company to develop the Huweiza and Naft Khana fields located along the country's border with Iran, and United Energy Group Ltd., another Chinese company, signed a deal to develop the Sinbad oil field near the southern city of Basra. This according to Dr. Thomas O'Donnell, the Global Fellow of the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, who teaches in Berlin, brings Baghdad both security and financial problems. Iraq's purchase of such a vast percentage of its gas from Iran poses a major security problem that's very similar to the security problem that Germany and the EU had by relying on Russian gas. O'Donnell, an expert in energy and geopolitics, told the MediaLine. In addition, it puts Iraq in a financial deficit. They're paying a lot of money to import gas from Iran, he said. Iraq has a struggling economy, with its currency dropping to a new low that's close to the value of the Iraqi dinar in the first months after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. It's also suffered due to the discrepancy in the price of the dollar between the central bank and the black market. They're paying a lot of money to import gas from Iran, he says. According to Iraq's oil minister, Hayan Abdul Ghani, the country expects to produce about 800 million standard cubic feet per day of natural gas. As a result of the deal signed this week with Emirati and Chinese companies, it'd bring a huge financial advantage, as they'll not have to pay that money out to Iran, and security advantage as well, as they'll be more independent from Iran, said O'Donnell. Dr. Ramos Siem, a Berlin-based consultant in energy and international politics, says that Iraq's oil industry has a serious issue of endemic corruption both in its regional and federal segments. Every multinational oil company and oil service provider has struggled over the years to enter into deals with the convoluted bureaucratic tiers of Iraq's oil ministry. The only way to circumvent such bureaucratic hurdles is to pay huge bribes and kickbacks, he told the MediaLine. He notes that the new constitution drafted by the Iraqi government after the 2003 U.S. invasion helped revive Iraq's oil production and exports, but it also created an inefficient and tangled politico-bureaucratic system tainted by inefficiency and cronyism, he said. This, together with the government's inability to pay public employees, which led to several strikes among the workers in the oil and gas industry, has led the country to remain in a situation of underproduction. O'Donnell says that this underproduction is a product of a combination of things. One is a matter of governance, which he explained is tied to corruption and the country's political instability in recent years. It's a matter of the government getting serious and putting the effort into this tamping down maladministration and corruption. It's simply getting the job done. He said, adding, the Iraqi government has promised to do this a number of times to one American president after the other. O'Donnell believes that the current Iraqi administration led by Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani might be more effective politically speaking than other administrations in the past. Also, he urges that producing gas and oil is at this point getting to be an existential need for Iraq's budget. The amount of money that they're spending basically giving it to Iran might have lit a fire under the administration for it to get serious about it, he concluded. And from Iraqi news, Iran looks forward to strengthening ties with Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Baghdad. The Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, during a joint press conference with the Minister of Affairs, Fuad Hussein, on Wednesday expressed his country's aspiration to strengthen the relations with Egypt and Saudi Arabia, thanking Iraq for its role in facilitating and enhancing the dialogue between Tehran and Riyadh. Abdollahian explained that Iran welcomes diplomacy and dialogue in resolving the issue related to its nuclear program and reaching a strong and sustainable solution, but U.S. officials make contradictory statements. The Iranian Foreign Ministry elaborated that Tehran appreciates the efforts of the Iraqi officials to promote regional dialogue, support Iraqi security and sovereignty, and also support Iraq in its fight against terrorism. Baghdad's taken important measures to prevent the use of the Iraqi territories by terrorists, and we're continuing our efforts to develop the bilateral ties, Abdollahian said. Early in February, the Saudi Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, visited Baghdad, where he reviewed the resumption of the Saudi-Iranian negotiations under the auspices of the Iraqi government. Also in February, the Iranian Foreign Minister revealed that he had a meeting with his Saudi counterpart on the sidelines of the Baghdad II summit in Jordan. Abdollahian mentioned that Farhan assured him of Riyadh's readiness to continue dialogue with Iran, noting that he also met with foreign ministers of Oman, Qatar, Iraq, and Kuwait. The last round of dialogue between Iran and Saudi Arabia took place in April 2022, but the dialogue stopped without reaching an agreement despite the statements of both countries' leaders of their desire to establish a bilateral relationship based on mutual respect. This from nna.leb.gov. Iraqi-Iranian foreign ministers meet in Baghdad. Iran's foreign minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian and his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hussein meet in Baghdad. According to Al-Sumaria TV, the two foreign ministers held talks on Wednesday, but the details of the negotiations haven't been released. Upon his arrival in Baghdad, Iran's foreign minister addressed reporters saying that the Islamic Republic is pleased to see Iraq back on track to play its natural and effective role in the region. Amir Abdollahian also said that he's in Iraq to pursue issues of mutual interests, as well as continue consultations regarding important regional and international affairs. The top Iranian diplomat scheduled to hold talks with political and judicial officials of Iraq during his two-day stay in Baghdad. He went on to say that there are close consultations between high-ranking authorities of Baghdad and Tehran on vital regional and international developments, and that he's in Iraq at the official invitation of the Iraqi foreign minister in order to finalize consultations. And from I-24 News, Iran foreign minister in Iraq for security talks. After Riyadh severed diplomatic ties with Iran in 2016, Iraq assumed a significant role as a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Top Iran diplomat Hossein Amir Abdollahian spoke with Iraq, a close neighbor and ally, on Wednesday to discuss the status of ongoing negotiations with Saudi Arabia. attempting to reduce regional tensions and border security. After Riyadh several diplomatic ties with Iran in 2016, Iraq assumed a significant role as mediator between the two countries. Nevertheless, efforts have been ineffective for several months. The two sides have met several times in Iraq since April 2021, but no talks have been made public since April 2022. In an interview with reporters in Baghdad, Amir Abdollahian praised efforts to strengthen negotiations and collaboration between Saudi Arabia and Iran. He was joined by his Iraqi counterpart, Fuad Hussein. Amir Abdollahian continued, "As part of the strengthening of cooperation with the countries of the region, we welcome a resumption of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia." Additionally, he spoke of the sluggish progress being made in Vienna-based negotiations with international powers to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement, which offered Tehran respite from sanctions in exchange for curbing its nuclear activity. In 2018, the United States unilaterally exited the agreement and reinstituted sanctions, which led Iran to start breaking its agreement-related promises. Talks to renew the deal began in 2021, but stopped the previous year. Iran's ready to take steps to conclude the negotiations on the basis of previous discussions and respecting the red lines defined by Tehran, Amir Abdollahian said, but if the American side chooses another path, all options are on the table. And remember to watch this space. Your engagement by way of a like, share, and or a subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Russia accuses Ukraine of planning to invade Moldova's breakaway region. Russia Defense Ministry accused Ukraine on Thursday of planning to invade Moldova's breakaway Transnistria region after a false flag operation, the RIA news agency reported. The ministry said Ukraine planned to stage an attack by purportedly Russian forces from Transnistria as a pretext for the invasion, according to RIA. Separately, the TASS news agency quoted Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin as saying the West had instructed the Chisinau government to stop all interaction from the Moscow-backed Transnistrian administration. Moldovan President Maya Sandu accused Moscow earlier this month of planning a coup to overthrow the government and drag Transnistria into its war. The mainly Russian-speaking region broke away from the Soviet Moldova in 1990. After the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, pro-Russian separatists fought a bloody war with Moldovan government forces. And from Aerotime.aero, Moldova authorities fear Russia plans to seize Chisinau airport. The recently appointed Moldovan Prime Minister Dorin Risian said Russia is considering taking control of Chisinau airport to open a new front in Ukraine, confirming a claim by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. On February 20th, 2022, Zelensky told the German media Die Welt that Ukrainian special services have intelligence about Moscow's plan to seize Chisinau airport in Moldova's capital city to use as a bridgehead before opening a new front in western Ukraine. Ukraine will always be ready to help Moldova, Zelensky said. Such a plan is reminiscent of Russia's initial offensive on Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, an air assault was launched by Russian paratroopers on Hostomel Airport, located in the vicinity of Ukraine's capital city, Kiev, to establish a bridgehead for more troops to be flown in. Though the assault eventually failed, the battle for Hostomel control led to the destruction of the An-225 and Maria, the world's largest aircraft. Risian, who assumed office on February 16, 2023, addressed Zelensky's declaration as reported by local media TV8. I mentioned there were and still are several scenarios of destabilization, the Moldovan Prime Minister said. They include several elements, including those mentioned by Zelensky, but I also mentioned that our institutions are ready to face such challenges. We've strengthened our capabilities and are prepared for various scenes aimed at the security of the Republic of Moldova, he added. On February 13, 2023, a Moldovan President Maya Sandu detailed Moscow's alleged plans to overthrow the power in place in Chisinau and announced a strength of security measures. Moldova, a neighbor under pressure since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the neighboring country of Moldova has seen its safety compromised in several instances. In the first hours of the offensive on February 24, 2022, the Moldovan Civil Aviation Authority ordered the closure of the airspace to avoid putting at risk civilian flights. On February 14, 2023, Moldova once again closed its airspace briefly, citing security concerns over an unidentified flying object. Due to its location, the airspace of Moldova was also crossed several times by cruise missiles fired at Ukrainian cities from Russian warships in the Black Sea. Debris from a Russian missile intercepted by the Ukrainian air defense fell on the Moldovan village of Nablus on October 31st, 2022. And from the informant.co.nz, the authorities fear a Russian military plan to take over Chisinau airport. Moldova says its military threatened by Russia. Its new prime minister fears an attempt to take over Chisinau airport. Moldova on the verge of a coup? Dorin Risian has only been in office for a few days, confirmed with Moldova. The words of Volodymyr Zelensky in the German media Die Welt. The Ukrainian president said earlier this week that Moscow would consider seizing Chisinau airport to transfer troops there before opening a new front in western Ukraine. The airspace was closed for a few hours. At the beginning of February, Moldovan intelligence services indicated they detected destabilizing Russian activities. Maya Sandu, the pro-European president, responded that our institutions work to ensure the security of the country and use all information from our partners to anticipate and prevent such attempts. On February 14th, Moldova closed its airspace for a few hours. The security reasons were put forward by local media without further precision against the backdrop of tensions between the former Soviet Republic and Moscow. Thursday the 16th, during a session in the Moldovan parliament, Doran Racian stressed that it's important to continue our efforts until the Russian forces withdraw from Transnistria, calling for the demilitarization of the pro-Moscow separatist region. Daniel Foda told him that this demilitarization was essential to ensuring the country's peaceful reintegration. The words angered Moscow, with the Kremlin accusing Chisinau of anti-Russian hysteria. And here's some footage from a recent protest in Moldova.
Several thousand protesters rallied in Moldova's capital on Sunday amid a cost of living crisis and skyrocketing inflation. The call was for the country's new pro-Western government to cover citizens' winter heating bills. The protest was organised by a recently formed group, Movement for the People, and supported by members of Moldova's Russia-friendly Shore Party, which holds 6 seats in the former Soviet Republic's 101-seat legislature. Some of the demonstrators called for the country's president, Maia Sandu, to stand down. Others held placards with the faces of some of Moldova's leaders and politicians placed next to photographs of large homes and fancy cars.
Sate, fără de zarplată, fără de lucru, fără de nic, cum să trăim noi mai departe? Și țările se ridică, cu și noi, suntem vopșe, cu tățul, dar suntem bomși.
Mai mult pentru pensie. Să ne ajungă și nouă. Ne-au spus că ne mărește, și ne mărește.
A week ago, President Sandu outlined what she claimed was an alleged plot by Moscow to overthrow the government in order to put the nation at the disposal of Russia and to derail it from its course to one day join the European Union. Russia strongly denies her claims.
And from breaking latest.news, this is Moscow withdraws its soldiers. Breaking latest.news. Not just the suspension of the START nuclear treaty. In the same speech on Tuesday, Vladimir Putin also revoked Decree 605, with which on 7 May 2012, he was already president himself. The Kremlin dictated foreign policy guidelines to the executive. They concerned inter alia the pro-Russian breakaway regions of Transnistria in Moldova and of Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia. Of particular concern is Transnistria, formerly Stalin's orchard, a productive and energy engine of Moldova, Russian-speaking ever since in 1940. Moscow decided to annex it in the Moldovan RSS to mitigate the latter's Romanian culture. In Transnistria, 4,100 square kilometers in the east of the country, with the capital Tiraspol, pro-Russian authorities hammer and sickle in the flag, nostalgia for the grandeur since '92, the Soviet Union has become separatism, and there remain, from the war of that year, an unspecified number of Russian soldiers, that is 1,500 to 2,000, thought to be formerly on a peace mission. An outbreak that's often flared up in recent months. In April 22, with mysterious explosions near Tiraspol, then from November 22, when inflation in Moldova reached 30% and total energy dependence on Russia was felt in all homes. Despite Western aid, and now in February with the demonstrations against the pro-European government in Chisinau, on 10 February that of Natalia Gavrilita resigned, and against the equally pro-European successor, Doran Racian, protests took place in the streets on 19 February. Now, the excerpt of the decree and the consequent worries about a Russian invasion of Transnistria, which the foreign ministry in Chisinau once again asked Russian troops to demilitarize yesterday. Be very careful, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov immediately replied, speaking of exceptionally tense relations between Moscow and Chisinau marked by an unconstructive anti-Russian hysteria. Last week, 605, deleted yesterday, he recognized Moldova's neutrality and sovereignty, and above all, its territorial integrity. Russia undertook cooperation actively to resolve the issue of Transnistria precisely in respect of Moldovan territorial integrity. Now this commitment's gone. Not only in the 2012 decree and no longer since today, Russia's also planned to promote the formation of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, modern democratic states according to the rule of law. Abkhazia and South Ossetia, Russophone, are breaking away, or they are breakaway regions of Russian-occupied Georgia. For many analysts, together with Transnistria, they would now be pieces of Great Russia that Putin aims to reassemble. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the leader of Abkhazia were received by the Belarusian dictator, Putin's number one friend. According to Moldova's pro-EU leaders, all the recent anti-government demonstrations that took place in Chisinau, called by the SOR party and the communists, who have not trusted the Iraqi government, are directed from Moscow. Natalia Gavrilida had defined them when she resigned, and the foreign minister of Chisinau yesterday asked the EU sanctioning the oligarch Ilan Sor, close to Putin and responsible for a Facebook campaign, invited Moldovans at the February 19th demonstration against Maya Sandu, who's been repeating since the beginning of January in chorus with Zelensky that Putin has in mind a coup to install a collaborationist government in Chisinau. Sandu wants to change the status of a neutral country that Moldova has had since independence. Yesterday, he took part for the first time in Warsaw at the summit of the Budapest Format, the group of Eastern European countries that are members of NATO. And on Tuesday in Warsaw, it says he, it says should say she, she's a she. She launched an appeal to Joe Biden. Come back to visit us. She was in Chisinau in 2011. We want to stay in the free world. Biden praised her efforts to join the EU. And from NDTV, let's see. Putin cancels order backing Moldova's sovereignty in separatist conflict. The decree, which included a Moldova component, outlined Russia's foreign policy 11 years ago, which assumed its closer relations with EU and US. President Vladimir Putin revoked on Tuesday a 2012 decree that in part underpinned Moldova's sovereignty in resolving the future of the Transnistria region, a Moscow-backed separatist region which borders Ukraine and where Russia keeps troops. The decree, which included a Moldova component, outlined Russia's foreign policy 11 years ago, which assumed Moscow's closer relations with the European Union and the United States. The order revoking the 2012 document was published on the Kremlin's website and states the decision was taken to ensure the national interests of Russia in connection with the profound changes taking place in international relations. It's a part of a series of anti-Western moves announced by Putin on Tuesday. Alexandru Flenchia, Moldovan chairman of the Joint Control Commission as the security zone around Transnistria, said the cancellation didn't mean that Putin was abandoning the notion of Moldovan sovereignty. The decree is a policy document that implements the concept of Russia's foreign policy, Flenchia told Publica TV. Moldova and Russia have a basic political agreement that provides for mutual respect for the territorial integrity of our countries. The Kremlin said that Russia's relations with Moldova, which last week approved a new pro-Western prime minister that vowed to pursue a drive to join the EU, were very tense. It accused Moldova of pursuing an anti-Russian agenda. Wedging between Romania and Ukraine, Moldova, one of Europe's poorest nations, has been led since 2020 by President Maya Sandu with strong U.S. and European Union backing. U.S. President Joe Biden met her in Poland on Tuesday, affirming his support. The 2012 decree committed Russia to seeking ways to resolve the separatist issue based on respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and neutral status of the Republic of Moldova in determining the special status of Transnistria. The Russian speakers of Transnistria seceded from Moldova in 1990, 1 year before the dissolution of the Soviet Union, amid fears that Moldova would merge with Romania, whose language and culture it broadly shares. A brief war pitted newly independent Moldova against the separatists in '92, but there's been virtually no violence in the past 30 years, with Russian peacekeepers still posted in a tiny sliver of land, which has no international recognition. Moldova's foreign ministry said it would carefully study the document. Very interesting. And from star.co.ke, we want Russia to come, say Moldova protesters. We're a laughingstock. The government's mocking us. Some cry. There are people with 4 or 5 children who literally have nothing to eat. Energy bills here now consume more than 70% of household income, according to Moldova's president. Beneath Moldova's soaring parliament building, a parade of its most precarious files slowly passed, bussed in by thousands from across the country, each with their private tale of poverty and frustration. Capped in a blue woolen hat, Allah thrusts her wide, pale face close to mine and says, "There are people with 4 or 5 children who literally have nothing to eat. Energy bills here now consume more than 70% of household income, according to Moldova's president. Allah tells me they swallow half of her pension. When we elected this government, they promised to raise salaries and pensions, but so far we haven't seen a penny," she says. Sunday's protests organized by Moldova's Russian Soar Party are being closely watched by governments across Europe and beyond. Most protesters travel to the capital city, Chisinau, by bus, with their costs reportedly covered by the Soar Party. The Russian Sword Party are being closely watched by governments across Europe and beyond. Most protesters traveled to the capital city Chisinau by bus, with their costs reportedly covered by the Sword Party. Days before the gathering took place, President Maya Sandu warned that Russia was plotting to send military-trained saboteurs into the country disguised as civilians to topple her pro-Western government. Russia has said the accusation is an attempt by Moldovan authorities to distract attention from their own social and economic failures. Moldova, strategically located on the border with Ukraine and harboring its own pro-Russian breakaway region, is dependent on Russia gas. Last year, Moscow cut its supply to Moldova by half, putting pressure on the government in Chisinau as it seeks to hold together its Romanian and Russian-speaking populations. Protests over the rising price of gas and electricity began last autumn. Speaking at a public briefing last Monday, President Sandu said that Russia has already attempted to destabilize the situation in Moldova via the energy crisis, which she said was expected to cause major discontent among the population and lead to violent protests. The plan now, she said, involved diversionists with military training who would undertake violent action, carry out attacks on buildings of state, institutions, or even take hostages. 57 people from nations friendly to Russia, including a Serbian football fan and several boxers from Montenegro, were denied entry to Moldova in the past few days, after checks by security services, and Moldova's airspace was unexpectedly closed for several hours this week. It's very clear that Russia is an aggressor state. Rosian Vasiloi, head of Moldova's border police, told the BBC. He said the threat had existed since 24 February, where the Ukraine war began, but he emphasized that it was different now. It's a mix of threats from inside and outside Moldova. As long as Ukraine continues to fight and wins the war, he believes the risks for Moldova are lower. If Ukraine falls, Moldova is next, he said. But I'm not afraid. Since the war began, President Sandu's government has tried to diversify the country's energy sources and wean it off dependence on Russian gas. But attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure and the cost of importing electricity from Romania hasn't made that easy. She said the alleged Russian plot would rely on internal forces such as the opposition Sword Party and called for Parliament to pass tougher security laws. Marina Taubor, SOAR's general secretary, who led today's protest outside Parliament, says that her party is not opposed to the EU and wants good relations with all sides. But there are those in her party who admit they would welcome Russian intervention. Orhe, an hour's drive north of the capital Chisinau, is a SOAR stronghold where we meet party councillor Iru Berenci. We're not afraid, he told me, because if Russia wanted to take Moldova, they'd do it in half a day. When asked if she would welcome that, Miss Berenci is unequivocal. In my personal opinion, yes, she said, or he said, with Russia, we'd be much better off than we are now. Many people in Chisinau see closer ties with the West as a way to secure Moldova's independence and democracy at a critical time. President Sandu's party has a solid majority in parliament, but the view from the crowd outside the parliament on Sunday was different, and there's the risk the pressure could widen the splits in Moldova's diverse society. The risk is clear when Allah and her friends were asked whether they believe Russia wants to infiltrate Moldova as their president fears. Yes, let them come, they shout. We want them. Come here. We want to be a part of Russia. And from the Weekly Blitz, Moldova threatens region by acting as NATO proxy. For Transnistria to be demilitarized, Moldova must stop threatening the region and start respecting the local people's right to political autonomy, writes Lucas LaRose. Moldova insists on the threat and blackmail strategy against Transnistria. The country's new head of government has called on Russian troops to withdraw from the autonomous republic in order for the region to be demilitarized. In fact, the Western-backed Moldovan tactic of trying to intimidate the Transnistrian people will only lead to more conflict and insecurity, creating a scenario of instability in the face which Moscow will not remain inert. And from Press TV,
the real nature of the Israeli regime.
Actually, you know what? That would be it. We're going to watch this space and remember that your engagement is probably the most important thing. Through a like, a share, and a subscribe, you can help us to increase our reach, and you'll accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Today's unemployment figures show the economy is moving in the right direction. The drop in unemployment is one more sign that the economy is strengthening.
And this is Chris Williamson on his removal from Parliament and regarding his show Palestine Declassified on Press TV.
The Parliament claims to be the home of democracy, the mother of parliaments, and yet here we are, parliamentarians clamping down on free speech. I mean, what have they got to be frightened about? I mean, I host a program about the Palestine struggle for freedom. It'd be interesting to find how many of the people who made the decision are members of the various Friends of Israel groups, which are quite prevalent across Parliament. A vast majority, indeed, of members of Parliament are members of organisations known as either Conservative Friends of Israel or Labour Friends of Israel. So it'd be interesting to I mean, I've not actually been able to find that out yet as to who it was that finally voted and made the decision. I mean, I think clearly the Zionist lobby is very exercised about the fact that the Palestine Declassified show is gaining traction now. I mean, they're doing their very best to suppress the reach of the show, but it is increasing the reach every week. So they have determined to suppress, to actually cancel out any alternative narrative to the one that they want to give to the public. So it seems to me this is very clearly because of the fact that we are exposing the Israeli regime for what it really is.
The Russian president's held a cooperation.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
I find your arguments strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
Logical, unemotional, completely pragmatic. And we poor, irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical humans again.
Which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed.
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
Will you try to understand how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me. I'm a scientist.
You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
Smotrich and Gallant agree on Defense Ministry power sharing. The power sharing crisis between Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and Minister in the Defense Ministry Betzalel Smotrich has come to an end. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Gallant, and Smotrich signed a document of understanding on Thursday regarding the division of responsibility in the defense ministry between the defense minister and the additional minister regarding the civil administration and the coordinator of government activities in the territories. This is pursuant to the coalition agreements and the Knesset decision on the day the government was established. According to Wallah, Smotrich will receive the majority of control over the civil administration, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will sort out the arguments regarding enforcement. Channel 12 reported that the two concluded that the military's freedom of operation would not be affected by the power sharing, and the appointment of officers in the civil administration would continue to be carried out by the IDF Chief of Staff, so that the organizational structure of the coordinator of government activities in the territories and the civil administration will remain as they were. And this from Jewish News Syndicate. Netanyahu, Gallant, and Smotrich reached deal on authority over civil administration. The defense ministry bodies responsible for construction approval and other bureaucratic matters in Area C of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Finance Minister Betzalel Smotrich on Thursday signed a document of understandings regarding the division of responsibility in the defense ministry, in which Smotrich also holds the post of minister. According to a joint statement, the document, which was not made public, outlines respective authorities over the civil administration and the coordinator of government activities in the territories pursuant to the coalition agreements. Last week, Netanyahu reportedly promised Smotrich that he would immediately transfer to him power over the defense ministry's civil administration. The move came after Smotrich slammed the civil administration for ordering the razing of Jewish-owned olive grove and orchard in the West Bank. The destruction of the property was carried out on the authority of Gallant, despite orders from Smotrich to freeze the demolition. As a minister in the defense ministry, Smotrich has been tasked by Netanyahu with overseeing the civil administration, the ministry body responsible for approving construction and handling other bureaucratic matters in Area C of West Bank. Gallant last month also overruled Smotrich's call to halt the razing of Or Chaim, an outpost commemorating Rabbi Chaim Drukman, the spiritual leader of the religious Zionism movement, who died on December 25th. That decision caused friction between Gallant and Smotrich, who in response had his religious Zionism party boycott the following cabinet meeting. Smotrich last week sent a letter to Netanyahu warning him that further delays in transferring to him full authority of the civil administration in accordance with the coalition agreement could threaten the stability of the government. About a month ago, as minister in the defense ministry appointed to oversee the civil administration, I instructed that the order against Hen bin Eliyahu's olive grove and orchard he nullified immediately, wrote Smotrich. But much to my surprise, the defense ministry brazenly violated the coalition agreement and overruled my decision. Minister Gallant has decided to continue the left-wing policies of former Minister Benny Gantz, even though the claims against this orchard were proven in court hearings to be false. Smotrich subsequently wrote on Twitter, Minister Gallant's denial of the unequivocal coalition agreement and the Prime Minister's dragging his feet on the matter are unacceptable and will not be allowed to continue. This is a clause that was clearly central to our agreement, and the basis for the existence of a coalition is the existence of coalition agreements. And from Politico, disappointment in Brussels after Israel expels MEP on official visit to Palestine. EU leaders expressed surprise and regret Tuesday after the Israeli government barred a member of the European Parliament from entering the country on official visit and deported her to Spain. Anna Miranda, a Galician MP with the Greens European Free Alliance group, landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv Monday evening along with 8 other lawmakers after 2 European Parliament delegations, one for Israel and one for Palestine. On the orders of the Israeli Interior Minister, Miranda was put on a flight to Madrid. It's a diplomatic conflict. It's intolerable that Israel exerts control over members of a delegation that's going to Palestine, not going to Israel, Miranda told Politico. A spokesman for the Israeli mission to the EU said the only reason that she was not allowed to enter is the issue that she tried to enter Israel illegally. This referred to Miranda's participation in a flotilla in 2015 that aimed to break the naval blockade of Gaza by Israel. Israel's recently elected a far-right coalition government led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Miranda said that while being held at the airport for 3 hours, a female border control guard repeatedly told her to shut up, and that when Miranda explained that she was an MEP, the person replied, "What is the European Parliament? It's nothing here." Miranda said she did not hide her participation in the flotilla when questioned. The 4-day visit by MEPs this week will include trips to the Israel-occupied Palestine territories of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where the Palestine Authority has limited autonomy. The delegation was denied access to Gaza, Miranda said. Parliament President Robert Metsola described her disappointment on Twitter, saying she will contact the Israeli authorities to demand answers and also convene the leaders of the political groups to discuss the next steps. Relations between Jerusalem and the parliament have been cordial as of late, with the institution having hosted Israeli President Isaac Herzog to mark Holocaust Memorial Day in January. Metsola, a Maltese MEP from the center-right European People's Party, visited Israel in May last year. Miranda was given the go-ahead to enter Israel according to emails dated February 2nd and 24th between the EU's External Action Service in Israel and the country's Foreign Affairs Ministry, seen in full by Politico. The email stated that Manu Pineda, a Spanish far-left MEP who chairs the Palestine delegation, was barred entry but made no mention of banning Miranda from entering. Miranda said it was a lie, that she was still banned from entering Israel. Otherwise, they would not have authorized me to travel, she wrote in a follow-up message. The spokesperson for the Israeli mission to the EU said Pineda, who did not travel to Israel with the rest of his delegation, supports Hamas, designated as a terrorist organization in the EU. The EU's General Court has ruled that Hamas should be removed from the list, a decision that's currently suspended, pending an appeal by the Council. Pineda told Politico in a statement, "I'm not a Hamas supporter, no matter how much the Israeli regime insists." He continued, the Israel regime can continue to insist on its alibi of photos in Hamas, but in reality, what they're doing today is preventing my work as a chair of the delegation for relations with Palestine and preventing the proper functioning of its delegation because of my past as human rights activist in Gaza. Israel's a very serious human rights problem and doesn't want anyone to witness the killings, forced displacements, illegal settlements, and systematic arrests, he added. Pineda's left group has demanded that the parliament take reciprocal measures for Israel. He said these means that no Israeli politician or diplomat should be allowed entry. Respect for all elected MEPs in the European Parliament is essential for good EU-Israel relations, said Nabila Masrali, the European Commission spokesperson for Foreign Affairs. This decision is deeply disappointing, and it's also surprising. And lastly, Palestine launches strike to protest Israel massacre in Nablus. Palestinians across the occupied territories have launched a full-day strike today to protest Israel's military raid, which resulted in 11 deaths and 102 injuries among Palestinians in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. The Israel's occupation military stormed the city yesterday with armed vehicles murdering 11 Palestinians, including a 16-year-old boy and 72 and 68-year-old men, in addition to wounding 102 others. The strike was called for by the Palestinian political factions, who announced that the protest is also in support of the Palestinian prisoners suffering against repressive measures in Israeli jails. Jordan calls on Israel to immediately stop escalation in Palestine. According to Wafa news agency, the Palestinian factions also encourage protest against the Israeli soldiers at contact points around the occupied territories. Shops and businesses, including banks across Palestine, remain closed, and students remained home after their schools and universities also joined the general strike. Public transportation services are also suspended today. Meanwhile, the Palestinian authorities called for an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting to discuss the massacre against defenseless Palestinian civilians in the occupied territories and to demand international protection. There's been an increase in the number of Israeli raids across the occupied West Bank over the past few months, occupied with violence carried out by illegal settlers who have at times even turned against Israeli forces. So we're going to open the channel here. And remember, your engagement through a like, share, and subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Beam me up, Mr. Spark. Beam me up.
Lock on transporters. Beam us up.
Beam us up, quickly. Beam us up home. Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up. Scott, prepare to beam us up.
Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up. Beam us up. Scotty, beam us up fast.
Stand by to beam us up.
Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up.
Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.